All right, guys, welcome back to the Clack Shack. And tonight I'm gonna be operating off the selfie stick here. I apologize, but I've got some folks that keep asking me about my vacuum table and how it works and how I put it together and all that. And I did a video in the past about it, but it was a lot more vague, I guess, and didn't explain things in depth enough. So I decided that I wanted to take and just make an entire video about nothing but the vacuum table. That way everybody understands how this thing works. But before we get into this, I want everybody to understand that when I first got my laser, I didn't really take into consideration, because in my shop, as you can see, it's a workshop, and there's not a lot of, I didn't have a concern about, smoking up the house or whatnot, because I weld in here, I cut wood, I have a wood burning fireplace that I built back here that burns wood in the winter time. So I really wasn't worried about a little bit of smoke. But I got my laser right before it got really cold here in Alabama, and I found that between the heater over there and the occasional opening the door and letting some smoke get in and the laser together, it was getting a little overwhelming. And so out of necessity, because after dropping the money that I did for the XTool, I didn't want to go have to buy an enclosure and all that, because at this point I'm still trying to decide, do I even like the thing? Is this going to be one of those things that I get and I don't like it, so I kind of toss it to the side or resell it? And it hit me, and I was like, these ventilation systems that I see everybody building, they buy these nice inline fans with the 3-inch, 4-inch ducts and all that. I didn't want to drop the money on that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and throw a waiver out there. I do have plans to rebuild my vacuum table. I'm going to turbocharge it a little bit better. I'm going to spend a little money on it now that I know that this is something I'm going to do long term, and that I'm going to keep the laser going. I'm going to be upgrading. I'm going to be making a better one. The one that I got now, there's a whole lot of redneck ingenuity went into that thing. Now, effective it is, but fancy, that's not it. So for those of you on a budget that want to have some type of ventilation, maybe you got some stuff laying around that you're not using, this may be an approach that you want to take. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this. It is what I use. It was born of necessity, and it works. So the basic principle, I will be keeping the basic principle in my redesign. The table's pretty much going to stay the same. The only thing that I'm going to be changing up is I'm going to come up with a different blower system to kind of accommodate this. So first of all, I want to go over and I'll just show you that, how it works and go over the basics of it. So stick around for a few minutes and we'll get to that. All right, guys, here we are. I'm just going to give you a quick flyover. Like I said, I want to apologize. I'm going to try to keep the camera swaying and moving to a minimum, but I'm holding this thing by hand on a stick, and that could go, very bad for some of you. So this is my setup. I've got it fixed. It does not move. You can grab this thing, you can hit it, you can do what you want. It's not going to move. Now, it does lift out of my table. I've made some little wooden brackets here that holds this leg, and then of course, let me get this camera turned around where I can get y'all in there to see it. Of course, in the back, I also have those little brackets, but it will lift out of those brackets. And of course, there is the custom jig right there, my interchanger for my jigs. And then on the back corner over here, I got the same setup. It's got that little block that it sits in, and like I said, I can raise this thing out of there, and I can take it out if I need to put the rotary on or whatever. All I got to do is lift it up, put the legs on it, and drop it back down. You'll notice I do not have what most of you refer to as an enclosure, so to speak. I have these little fences, and really the only purpose these serve is they just kind of keep the smoke as it rises. They keep the smoke from going off the table. And if you'll look along the horsefly in the shop, that is not a good thing. I'm gonna have to get this guy. But if you look along the edge right there, you'll see those little tiny holes. Well, those little tiny holes, I've got that line of them around that side. They go around. Ooh, this is gonna make you guys drunk. Okay, they go around from there. They go all the way around the perimeter of my vacuum table, and they go all the way back around to this side, and then back to the rear. Oh, hang on, horsefly. Oh, missed him. But the rear does not have any ports, and the reason I did that was because I felt like most of the air was going to come this way, and what that does is it creates a downdraft. And for those of you who have never paid attention to it, I do not use a honeycomb. That is a galvanized steel backer right there, and 1/4 inch hardware cloth that I've got pulled tight, and it is held down by these little strips of wood right here. This wood also serves as kind of a dam to kind of create that down pull into those holes for the smoke. And in just a second, we'll demonstrate. Got something really special for that part. And so what happens is, as the smoke comes up off of the workpiece, as we all know, smoke just kind of hangs around. But if there's a downdraft because of the table, then as the smoke moves to the sides of the table, that downdraft that's going into these holes, it gets caught in that, and it creates kind of a, for lack of a better word, like a vacuum curtain, I guess you could say, and it'll catch that smoke and pull it back down. Now, for demonstration purposes, I am going to fire up the D1, and I'm going to let it run. I'm going to intentionally cause a lot of smoke, and I'm going to let you guys watch it, and then I'm going to turn the table on, and just to show that it does make a difference. So give me just a few minutes. I'm going to go over here in my scrap wood pile and find a nice piece of smoky wood. I think probably the cedar would be the smokiest, and then we're going to really bore a hole in this thing and see if we can't churn out some smoke. So stick around for just a minute. Let me get that set up, and we'll be back for the demonstration. I've got some cedar loaded into the D1, and we're fixing to make some smoke. I'm going to do the first few minutes. I'm going to leave the vacuum table off completely, and we're just going to endure the smoke and see how it rises and see how much smoke we can generate, and then we'll go from there. And what I'm doing, if you can see on my machine here, is I've created just a small circle, and I've got that circle running at 50 speed at 100% power output. And from what I know about cedar, this is going to generate a pretty healthy amount of smoke, so should be a good test of the system to see how it works. So here we go. Get my glasses, doing this one-handed, so bear with me. Camera on a stick. Oh, by the way, for those that you didn't know, one of my feather friends is coming to visit, and I just did a video about these guys. A lot of times you'll see them in the videos that I make, and they're just kind of my guard chickens. So if you want to know what kind of bird that is and what's up with that bird, I just dropped a video, and the name of it is, what is that bird? And that would be those guys right there. Those two little birds right there. So yeah, check that out. And it's just funny that I just dropped that video and they come in here to get some cat food. They like to share food with the cats. So we're gonna go ahead and get this fired up and see what kind of smoke we can make. All right, here we go. About to launch into this burn, and we're gonna see exactly how much smoke we can stir up. So there we go. As you can see, it's quite an excessive amount of smoke there. I'm hoping you can see that. If you can't see it, I don't know. What would be a good way of being able to see this smoke a little better? Lots of smoke. Lots of smoke. So watch what happens down here at the bottom when I turn this table on. As you can see, it's cleaning the room out pretty good. So now the smoke is coming off of the piece and into the hole. Maybe this would be easier to see with the lights out. Okay, that's better. But what if I really make it dark? Now you can actually see where the smoke is going. And as you can see, so the smoke is getting pulled into the holes. You can see a little trail of it going this way to the hole, and then a little trail over that way. So there you go, guys. Oh, that's actually cool, pretty cool to be able to see that. Now, after a few minutes of running, it's got most of that smoke that I created in the beginning out of here. I still got a little bit lingering in the shop from where we had it going for so long without it on. Like I said, it doesn't contain 100% of the smoke, but I would venture to say it gets the vast majority of it. And like I said, I am excessively generating smoke on purpose. So, but you can see the table in action. You should be able to see that smoke sliding over into the side there. And like I said, that's a very deep burn on that too. So while that's running, we'll go outside, and I'm just going to show you what I got here. And guys, like I said, this was created out of necessity. The main part of it is outside, and all it is an old shop vac. And when I told you it had a little redneck ingenuity on it, I wasn't lying. But that's all it is, guys. I mean, I'm gonna upgrade the blower or the shop vac. I can't decide if I want to go with I'm probably gonna end up going with one of the 3-inch exhaust fans, and I'm gonna put the fan outside and build me an enclosure for it, or put it underneath the little tent where my air compressor stays outside, to keep it out of the rain. But I do like the fact that the vacuum itself is outside, and so I don't have that constant, because I had it inside in the beginning, and that constant noise really wore me down in here. So as soon as this finishes, well, I set it on several passes, so we're going to stop that. But now I got the laser off, I can get rid of those. But the basic principle, look at that wood, guys, by the way. That is some nice milled cedar right there from yours truly. I make a lot of stuff out of this stuff. It'll cut relatively easy too. But the upgrade that I did, and it took a little wiring. Luckily, that's kind of one of my things that I can do, is I put a switch here. This switch controls the vacuum outside. The only real noise that you're hearing inside here is just the hissing of the air being pulled through these little tiny holes right here. Like I said, these holes are all the way around it. I've got them on all the corners. The only problem that I have, and I know is a weakness of the blower inside that shop vac, is it doesn't quite have enough cubic feet per minute. So I'm gonna either, like I said, get a blower and put in to boost the level of airflow, or maybe even just get a bigger shop vac. But looking at the two, my cheaper alternative at this point is going to be to go online and find me a nice fan with some high CFM and go ahead and just replace that, run a little bit bigger duct from the table outside and go that way. But to give you a rundown of the general layout of this thing, I'm going to do a quick walkthrough and just show you how this thing's laid out. Like I said, this is y'all are asking what I did, and I'm just showing you what I did and what I built. And it works for me, might not work for you. It's not as nice as some of those enclosures I see. I've even considered about making mine fully enclosed, and I'm not saying that's not a possibility on my next rebuild, that I don't enclose it completely and still use some ventilation up top so that I can pull fresh air in up top and then expel the gases out the bottom, which is probably what's going to end up happening. But for right now, this is what I got, this is what I use, and it works. Now, I try not to stand over this thing and huff it while it's running, just in case, because I'm usually over here on my table or on one of my saws doing something else. But the basic principles of this thing is this box underneath here, if you take this board here off, that is basically a 2x4 frame. And the way I came up with the measurements is I took the measurements of the D1, I added a 1/2 inch to it, and I built my frame to where the outside diameter of the frame was a 1/2 inch wider on each side than the D1. All right, and then I went from there, I built that box. This table, I actually built this bench, built this table. It's made out of some pine wood that I milled. And so underneath the bottom, if you get under here and look, all I've got is I cut a hole for the vacuum line right there in the bottom of this table. And I sealed all the gaps and all the cracks underneath here so that basically inside this 2x4 box, it is completely sealed, and it creates a vacuum chamber, so to speak. And what happens is the air goes in through here. The inside of this thing is hollow, is void. There's nothing between this and the table but just airspace. And then the vacuum hose comes in the bottom. I've got it sealed around it on the inside of the box so that it creates airtight vacuum. I used some of the aluminum foil tape and sealed all the cracks, glued everything and caulked it when I put it together. So that's why we're not taking it apart right now. And the top, if you can see here, the top layer is a piece of 1/2 inch plywood. And then on top of that, there's this thin layer of galvanized steel, which is identical to this piece of galvanized steel, which is what I had used early on when I got my XTool. And I used this as my cutting backer. And then eventually, when I got ready to build my enclosure, if you look, this piece is not as big as my workspace. So I had to go find a 24 by 24 piece of galvanized. And so that's what that is. And so let me get a measuring tape here. And so I took the galvanized and put it inside the box. And like I said, I know what you're saying. You're gonna look right here and go, oh God, man, that's 25 inches. But you gotta account for the 1/2 inch material that I've encased this box in from here to here. Without that 1/2 inch encasing, if you just measure the plywood itself, it's 23.5 inches. So I built the box, created a vacuum chamber, put the plywood on top of it, made sure everything was sealed. When I put it together, I used some liquid nails to kind of seal it down. And then I went back and taped the edges where the joints are. And that's the reason that these guys eventually got put on there, is because the HVAC tape was visible on the sides and I just didn't like that. So I decided to dress it up and give it these nice little side bodies. That also afforded me the opportunity to kind of have a protective lid for my machine. And so I can take and put the lid on there, and that kind of protects my laser, because I got 3 barn cats that live in here. When I'm not out here working, they're out here patrolling for mice. And I was afraid one of them would get up there and drop something or knock something down on top of my laser. So I built this to just kind of basically for a helmet for my laser. And I put that on there when it's not being used. But that's the general principle, guys. I mean, it's nothing complicated. It's an old shop vac that I didn't have a need for, because I bought this nice new one because I needed a bigger one. So I decided to take the old shop vac and make it into a blower for this, because that's all I had on hand at the time. Is this was not something I set out and bought stuff to build. I built this thing just out of stuff I had laying around. So that's how it works. The principle, I think, is a solid principle for doing this type of work. I do need a bigger fan to kind of pull more volume of air down in there, because it will get overwhelmed at times and it just can't keep up. But vacuum chamber, galvanized aluminum or galvanized metal top. This is the 1/4-inch hardware cloth. You can get this stuff at Tractor Supply or whatever, wherever. And all it does is it provides just a little bit of an air gap between the top of the bed and the workpiece, so that once you punch a hole all the way through the piece, the smoke will come out the bottom, goes over, and goes out. And so that's the general principle. Woodworkers, a lot of woodworkers, especially for routing and doing sanding and stuff like that, if you'll go to woodworker channels, you can look up vacuum tables that they use for that. And there's some expensive vacuum tables out there that have filtration systems, and they're awesome. That was kind of where I got the idea. But this was just kind of what I had on hand, you know, kind of redneck way of doing it. And it's worked for about 8 months. Like I said, I'm looking at upgrading it now. I'm just kind of waiting to figure out exactly how I want to do it, because I want to do this, rebuild this thing one time and be done with it. But that's what I got, and that's about all I know to say about it. And if you guys can't tell, one of the things that I probably need to invest in the Clack Shack is air conditioning. Temperatures are up in the high 90s here now, and it's getting a little hot. So I don't know which is going to win out, you know, redoing the vacuum table or maybe coming up with an air conditioner. I did go today and get myself another fan. So hopefully it'll be a little cooler in here. It may be noisier, but it'll be a little cooler.